Ladies and gentlemen, the next host of Two Way Tonight, Mark Halperin. Applause, applause, applause. Thank you, thank you. Mark comes on the stage. Oh, thank you, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Welcome. Thank you. I want to begin tonight. No. All right. Thank you for joining. Third day of the Trump administration, second full day, and another day of just crazy news developments. Now, as of this hour, as far as I know, President Trump hasn't held a sprawling press availability with the pool. So it's a little bit different than day one and day two. In fact, as far as we know, he didn't speak on camera today, but there's still a lot of news. And best of all, I would say, are our two guests. Our two guests are fantastically knowledgeable and interesting and funny people, and they will be with us shortly to guide us through an understanding of the intricacies, complexities, hilarities of what's going on in our politics right now and government and culture, maybe a little fly fishing. Steve Elmendorf, a Democrat, Mercedes Schlapp, a Republican. You're going to love them both. You may already know them, but they're fantastic. So they'll be here to take your questions, which reminds me, if you want to ask a question, please raise your electronic hand if you're here on the two-way platform. As always, we love new people. If you've never asked a question before, tonight could be the night. Connor, have you ever asked a question before? I don't know. Connor's muted and he refuses to do a thumbs up. Connor, have you asked a question before? Thumbs up or thumbs down. I don't know if Connor has, and he refuses to say, which makes me a little suspicious. Anyway, if you're watching on YouTube or X, thank you for joining us. As always, please feel free to participate in the chat if you wish. I won't read it, but others will. Don't write smack in the chat. Peace, love, and understanding, the presumption of grace to all. Particularly now, we've done episodes discussing January 6th. As a journalist, I recoil a little bit from the liberal outlets leading with and being obsessed by January 6th and only covering that. It's an important story, and we do talk about it here, and we will tonight. But I understand why conservatives say enough of January 6th. Let's move on. And as I said this morning, I wish the pardons had been cast more that way. So I think that makes it a little bit more understandable, tenable. But what I'd like to do tonight is let the conversation go where it will. If I look down at my list before me of what news has been made today, on the merits, there's the most news that's been made on January 6th, even though there's a lot of other news. My judgment as a news person is that the most interesting and important things that are going on right now relate to January 6th and the aftermath, what Republicans are saying and doing about it, and what the Democrats are doing. But again, I also understand why people are saying stop leading with January 6th. Lead with the lead. First three letters of news are NEW. What's new today? Well, let me tell you what's new. On the immigration front, lots of announcements from the White House about how they plan to enforce the border. Lots of discussion about the importance. Hold on, is there a Sean Hannity clip? Yeah, please pull that because the first Hannity clip is being played right now. So can we go to that? Can we go to Fox right now? Is that possible? Oh, there, it's already gone. We'll get the first clip because I forgot about the Hannity interview being released
Yeah.
at 6, which of course it was. So we'll get that in a second, see what they chose. In any event, the Lake and Riley Act passed the House today, which will be the first bill passed under this administration. Donald Trump will, of course, sign it. So that's on that. On nominations, news there. John Thune, we talked about it this morning, is in a little bit of a staring contest with the Democrats who are delaying using the procedural ridiculousness of the Senate, delaying the confirmation votes. So John Thune is saying, you want to delay, as he said, we can do it the hard way or the easy way. He's currently still threatening to keep the Senate in all weekend so he can have those extra days to move these nominees along. And as administrations of both parties do, he's playing the national security card and saying, in particular, it's outrageous that the Democrats are holding up the men and women who would keep us safe if they were confirmed. The Fox News Capitol Hill reporter, Chad Pergram, is an excellent reporter. He breaks a lot of news, has really good sources. He seems to be reporting, the language is, I won't say squirrely, but a little opaque. He seems to be reporting that 3 Republican senators who have not committed publicly to voting for Pete Hegseth could vote no. He says something like, watch them. That would be your old standbys, your Murkowski, your Collins, and your McConnell. And if all 3 vote no, that means every other Republican has to vote yes, and J.D. Vance has to ruin his day and his evening by going to Capitol Hill to cast the tie-breaking vote. Now, I could think of some Republican senators who might not have already committed to vote yes. The allegations made by Hegseth's ex-sister-in-law, according to Politico, has not brought anyone who was publicly yes to publicly undecided or publicly no, which could mean that there are 50 votes, which would be enough to confirm him by his chinny chin chin. But of course, there could be some fourth person. So we'll watch that. And then, as I said, there's still the issue of the other Republicans who may not have already taken a public position. On January 6th, interesting, Kamala Harris sticks her head up from Los Angeles, #1, please, and sends a fundraising solicitation for the Democratic National Committee. Based on the traffic I see, she still seems to be one of their top producers when she signs the letter. So here you see the Harris Fight Fund, which is the way they're currently branding her fundraising solicitations. Can you take that full so people can read it at least a little bit? This is a fundraising solicitation from the DNC, and as you can see, it's about January 6th and about the pardons and how that makes it more important than ever that we have a strong Democratic Party that will stand up to President Trump, believe in the rule of law and democracy, and the infrastructure that is capable of flipping one or both branches of Congress in the next election. So interesting that she's signing this fundraising email solicitation on this topic. The House, #3, please, announced that they were going to investigate January 6th, but a much different investigation than the Democrats did when they were in the majority. They're doing an investigation into the investigation to see how things were handled. And I suspect Speaker Pelosi will come off less well in this investigation than she did in the Adam Schiff investigation. And then finally, Speaker Johnson today, after yesterday kind of dodging the question of what he thought of the pardons by saying he hadn't seen the list yet, today spoke at some length about what he thought of it in a way that I'm sure would be pleasing to the what we like to call the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue. Roll #2, please.
Republicans have long said you guys back the blue. How do you justifiably say that when Trump just pardoned a bunch of violent January 6 rioters who attacked Capitol Police? And if those rioters come to the Capitol, will you welcome them back here?
So look, everybody can describe this however they want. The president has the pardon and commutation authority. It's his decision, and I think what was made clear all along is that peaceful protests and people who engage in that should never be punished. There was a weaponization of the Justice Department. There was a weaponization of the events. The following, the prosecutions that happened after January 6th. It was a terrible time and a terrible chapter in America's history. The president's made his decision. I don't second guess those. And yes, it's kind of my ethos, my worldview. We believe in redemption. We believe in second chances. If you would argue that those people didn't pay a heavy penalty, having been incarcerated and all of that's up to you. But the president's made a decision. We move forward. There are better days ahead of us. That's what we're excited about. We're not looking backwards. We're looking forward.
All right,
even
again,
as the
very
Speaker said he's not looking backwards or looking forward. He did.
All right, very polished answer. And again, I don't think the White House would be disappointed there. We have the Hannity bite. It's on the pardons, but it's not on the Trump pardons. It's on the Biden pardons. Let's play that.
This guy went around giving everybody pardons. And the funny thing, maybe the sad thing, is he didn't give himself a pardon. And if you look at it, it all had to do with him.
All right, that's it. That's all they played. All right. So that's at 9 o'clock tonight. We'll have full coverage, team coverage, as we like to call it, tomorrow morning on the morning meeting. All right. If you'd like to get in the conversation, please raise your electronic hand. We're going to get lots of you in tonight for 2 great guests. I'm just going to sit here and call on people while they talk because they are smart ease. Start with Mercedes Schlapp. I'm going to unmute her in a second. I'm going to bring Steve in. Steve Elmendorf. There's Steve Elmendorf. And there's Mercedes. Mercedes, do you guys know each other? You and Steve?
I know Mercedes' husband, Matt, but I don't know Mercedes.
Yeah.
I know. Well, now we know each other, Steve. So, and I don't know why Mark thinks I'm very funny because I don't think I'm that funny. I think Matt's funnier than I am, but that's,
Matt does imitations, right?
Huh?
Matt does imitations,
oh,
right?
Yes, he does.
Yeah,
The
Matt
Donald
does good
Trump
imitations.
imitation is my favorite.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Steve, do you do imitations?
I don't do imitations, sorry.
All right. I'm incredibly fond of both of you.
I don't think I'm funny either.
Okay, you're both very funny. I know you're both funny. You're both funny in what we like to call an understated way, which is one of my
Thank you.
favorites.
Thank you, Mark.
All
I'm
right.
feeling better
Very,
about myself
very,
already.
very grateful that you both make time and so eager to hear from both of you. And as always, feel free to ask each other questions if something comes up. Last night we had a Republican and a Democrat on. We had I'm blanking on. We had what's her name? Thank you.
This is what happens with the Trump the Trump
Yeah, no.
presidency. It moves so
Celinda
fast,
Lake,
you can't remember.
Celinda Lake was on, and
Yeah.
Christine, again, I just can't
Kristen
remember
Davis.
names.
Kristen Davison.
Kristen Davison. All right, Steve, you know Celinda, and Mercedes, you know Kristen. Maybe even know both of them, but they were excellent, and we're so glad to have another very smart Democrat, very smart Republican here. And Steve, I want to talk about some specifics, but I want to start with you. Celinda said very openly and definitively that Donald Trump was off to a great start. And she described in vivid, explanation why she thought, just from an analytical point of view, he was. Do you agree? And if so, how would you describe it? If not, why would you argue they're not off to a great start from their own point of view? Not in terms of their policies that you don't agree with, but just from execution, do you think they're off to a great start?
I don't agree with any of their policies so far, virtually none. But and I think great may be, maybe I would say good, not great. But I think they've had a pretty good start. And I think, look, I think Trump, I call it the three A's. I think Trump has three things going for him. One, and had going for him, and it's why he got elected. One is authenticity. You can agree with him, you can disagree with him, but the guy radiates authenticity. And sometimes some of the things he says that you disagree with the most sort of reinforce that authenticity. You say, why would anybody say that? Well, because that's authentically what he believes. Two, he commands attention, just constant attention. And I think, we will see over the next 4 years, does at some point that attention become, people get tired of it. But at the beginning of a presidency, this command of attention is very different than what we saw with Joe Biden, who did not command attention for a lot of reasons. Third, action. He takes a lot of actions. And I think that the American people want action. And sometimes as I read a lot about people's reaction to things Trump does, I think some of it is people say, I don't like exactly what he's doing, but I want to do something. And I think he's been masterful at doing that. It's sort of, I don't like everything he's doing on immigration. I don't like everything he's doing on DOGE, but I think something should happen. And I think he benefits a lot from that. So I think his authenticity, his command of attention, and his action are so far serving him pretty well. I don't know that will all, play out over months and years. And when you run up against Congress, which we can talk about, which is a complicated place that doesn't, that I could argue has problems with all three of those things. But so far, I think he's doing pretty good.
Mercedes, I would say drop the F and Mike. That was great, right? That was a good list.
I know.
The
Wow,
three A's.
Steve, I think you and I can become best friends quickly here.
Well, I
Mercedes-
disagree with every single thing he's
I
doing.
I understand, but he's got the three A's going for him. Mercedes, I know, just because I'm psychic, that you think it's also starting well. And you used to work with President Trump in communications over there. What could they be doing better? And you don't need to be like crazy critical, but what would you like to see more of, less of?
Before I go into what I think they should be doing better, I think what's interesting to note is that, since I worked in the first administration and I was brought in 6 months in the first term because there was so much infighting, such disorganization in that part of the administration. So they needed individuals that had worked in the White House to come in. I was brought in to develop the processes for a lot of the first term, and to watch the president and his team be able to execute the amount of work that they've done in such a short period of time. It shows you how prepared they were for a while in getting these executive orders in motion, in understanding how the rollout process would be to get this done. And I find that their goal right now is to overwhelm the system. You overwhelm it so that the press is too busy going from one story to the next, to the next, to the next. It's not even giving the press a moment to digest what's happening. With that being said, and you're seeing, to Steve's point, there is this sense of motion and action happening, which I think the American people are hungry for. It's also making sure that you're pacing yourself so you don't lose those critical moments of showing these accomplishments that you're doing. So right now it's quantity, get a lot of it done in terms of these executive orders, and he is prioritizing the immigration issue, which for the first time in a long time in an election, immigration, just like the economy, were the two top issues when it came to what the American voters decided that was going to be what they were going to vote on. So watching him take action, I think, is really effective. Mark, you put me in a hard position when you ask me what we think
Just a tweak,
President
just
Trump.
a little tweak, just a tweak. I'm not.
I gotta tell you, I would probably pace it a little better so you don't lose the news cycle. So, like, for example,
Yeah.
yesterday they had this massive announcement on the biggest infrastructure in history. Okay. This is with OpenAI, with Oracle, with SoftBank. It's a Stargate initiative, bringing jobs to places like Texas. Let it breathe a little more, right? Like,
Yeah.
let yourself be able to capture one of these moments where in essence you can then really hone in a little deeper in then putting out your surrogates to talk about it, followed by making sure that then you have your echo chamber basically saying, applauding the efforts and getting this done. So that's where you have to manage that quantity versus making sure that you don't lose the quality of these announcements. The president just broke right now the breaking story on declaring the Houthis as a terrorist organization. So again, let these breathe a little more would be my suggestion as you're in terms of making sure that you're getting the bang for your buck in these big announcements.
So that happened, what you said about Houthis. The other thing that just happened is it's being reported that the administration is demanding that if you see someone in the government violating the new DEI policy, you have to call them out. The thing you mentioned about the policy yesterday, I didn't mention it. Elon Musk apparently didn't like the announcement yesterday. He was critical of it. But whatever. Okay.
Can I just mention something on that real quick, Mark, on Elon Musk? Real quick. I just want to add that on the Elon Musk issue, that is a big issue that I think we're going to keep running into, which is Elon Musk has to follow the president's lead. And if he truly is going to be part of this Doge effort, and not go after, like he's been going after OpenAI because he has a fight with OpenAI. And so that's really reflecting that Elon Musk may have a little bit of a different agenda than what President Trump is trying to push.
As I like to say, there's a reason they're going to call him a special government employee.
Special. You're so special.
Different sense of special.
Right.
All right. I want to ask you, well, first, Steve, you said you didn't like Doge. How do you know you don't like Doge? What have they done that you don't like?
Well, I think Doge is a ridiculous effort that's not going to succeed, but I do think Democrats should act. We started this a long time ago with reinventing government with Al Gore. You might remember, Mark.
I do.
I think we should embrace making the government more efficient. I think and making the government operate better. I think the problem is that Elon has put up these ridiculous numbers that are contrary to what Trump has said, where he said we're not going to touch the three biggest things that drive federal spending: Medicare, defense, and Social Security. So if you take the three of them off the table, the notion that you are going to have massive cuts in spending is just it's contrary to the facts. Now I know the facts don't matter sometimes anymore, but I think Democrats should frankly embrace some of this effort and say, yes, we are going to figure out how to make government more efficient. We're just going to do it in a way that doesn't hurt the people who voted for you.
Yeah. All right, that's excellent. So let's talk about Donald Trump for a second. And again, raise your hand if you want to get in the conversation. Bring folks in a moment. We've never had a second-term president like this. For one, he had 4 years off to think about it and plan. For two, he's rested, much more rested, and the staff's more rested because they're not slogging into year 5. They're slogging into year 1 prime. And he's not being investigated for stealing the election. Everybody's acknowledging he won. I want to talk about this notion of two things that are different about him. One is he is kind of get a chance to kind of reintroduce himself, right? Because it is a different presidency. And the other is he's not under the strain of being investigated or not having won the popular vote. So the concept is Trump happy warrior. Play the other hand he bite, please.
Let's talk about the moment you walked back in this office, this desk, this room, your carpet. How'd you feel?
Well, it was a lot of work. And as you know, I felt that we shouldn't have had to necessarily be here. Could have been done. A lot of work could have been, it would have been over. We wouldn't have inflation. We wouldn't have had the Afghanistan disaster. We wouldn't have October 7th with Israel, where so many people were killed. And you wouldn't have a Ukraine war going on. But with all that being said, I think it's bigger. It's bigger than if it were more traditional.
Only the second time in history
Yeah.
somebody didn't have consecutive terms.
Yeah. Well, they say it's historically bigger. I don't know about that. But I can say it showed us a couple of things. It showed us that the radical left, their philosophies and policies are horrible.
All right. So he was shot, and he is older, and he did leave and come back. But Mercedes, you know him well. Do you see difference in him? Do you see him as kind of more serene and happy, or do you just see the same guy?
No, I feel like he has really changed in a lot of ways. I remember when I saw him, it was probably in October. We were hosting an event, and he was there. And just how he approached me and talked to me was so different. And I do think that after that assassination attempt, there was just this sense, this wake up call for him of saying, goodness gracious, God, and he says it like, I was saved by God to be able to do this job right now. So I think he really is taking it all in. I think there is a definite sense of calmness. It's gone from kind of like the angry Trump, and yes, the feeling that it's everyone against him, and taking him down to the fact of saying, I've got this great purpose that I have to accomplish. And I think that it's something much bigger than him, and he recognizes it. It's really interesting because when Matt and I had met with him one time earlier during this year, and he himself was concerned of trying to figure out, how are we going to turn these things around? All these decisions made by Biden, would it be too late to turn these things around in our country and in the world? And he knew he wouldn't. He goes, I don't have enough time to get it all done in 4 years. So he himself recognizes this, that he's got to move quickly. He's got to move decisively to make these fundamental changes, in hopes that we can end the war between Ukraine and Russia, that we can stabilize the Middle East, that we can ensure that we get a handle on our immigration system, that we can ensure we can bring prices down for the American family. So I feel like there's a sense of urgency in him, but in addition to that, with a sense of calmness and focus to get it done and get it done fast.
I couldn't agree more, and you said it better than I could have. Steve, in 1991, 92, in 99 and 2000, and in 7 and 8, Clinton, Bush, Obama, all two-term presidents, were seen by the other party as daunting and formidable, right? They hope that guy doesn't get the nomination. Now, Clinton, of course, had his problems, but he was seen as daunting and formidable. It's a generational talent. Same with Obama and Bush. Trump, you guys wrote him off, in 16, and then he won. Do you see him, even though he's a lame duck a second term, do you see him as daunting and formidable?
Absolutely. He is I think you wrote about it yesterday or the day before. I mean, he's in a commanding position in terms of where he is in the political discussion, and where he's been in the political discussion since 2015. I mean, you can have a lot of feelings about Donald Trump. You can have a lot of negative feelings about Donald Trump, but there is no question that he is a commanding presence in our national politics, like it or not. Now, I would give him, two words of advice if he wanted to do better. And I know he doesn't need them from me. But one, I think he should be less angry. Now, maybe that runs contrary to my point that he's authentic, and that part of his authenticity is he's so angry. But I do think being more optimistic and less sort of some of the words and verbiage he uses is so hostile towards other people that I think that's a problem. And two,
hold on, Mercedes wants to respond to that one. And then
Look, Steve, with all due respect, I'd be so pissed off if I would have federal prosecutors and the Department of Justice constantly going after me, humiliating him, making him spend millions and millions of dollars after what they have done to him and his family, yeah, I'd be a little pissed off. I don't know about you, but I'd be
I
mad.
think his anger's directed at more than that. I just think he's just generally comes across in a lot of his speeches as angry. Second, I think he needs to focus on the future, not the past. And I know that goes contrary to what you just said, Mercedes. I know he's deeply resentful of what happened to him and he wants to spend time on it. But again, I think the American people want you to think about them and their problems and what you're doing to make it better. And I think, to bring up January 6th, I think the problem with the January 6th thing is it's all looking backwards. I mean, it's the problem. I have substantively a lot of problems with what happened, obviously, but I think Mike Johnson saying, well, we need to move to the future. I'm not going to talk about that, and then saying I'm going to have a committee to investigate it, or James Comer saying we have a committee to investigate the Biden pardons. I think that everybody would be better off to talk about the future and what are they doing to make people's lives better for tomorrow.
I mean, Harris is fundraising off of it for the DNC. So they have been stuck on J6, and they themselves use the whole argument of J6 and the democracy angle to try to see if that could be the winning theme for the Democrats, and it completely failed.
Who would you compare, Mercedes, you first, who would you compare Trump's relationship to Congress right now to? What past president?
Oh, goodness, that's a great question. I find it so unique right now in the sense that he has such a commanding presence in basically navigating and dominating the themes and the policy issues that they're going to hone on. I'm not sure if I've seen anything quite like
Steve,
that yet. I mean, you could say like Obama and Nancy Pelosi could have been the case. That would probably be the closest, but I almost think that Speaker Johnson very much is, following President Trump's lead. I think with Speaker Nancy Pelosi, she was probably a lot more dominant in pushing through what she was going to decide over President Obama.
Okay.
I think his
ahead,
relationship with his own party in the Congress is unique. I don't think there's ever been one like it. When I worked in the Congress, in both when Bill Clinton was president and when George Bush was president, in each case, they had of their own party on any given day, 10 to 20 to 30 members that they had to work and worry about, who could go off the reservation at any moment on any issue. And Trump is, as you know, he's polarizing. Like he's unified his side completely. I mean, it's very few people who are going to buck him. He's also unified the other side in a very closely contested Congress in a way that not many Democrats are going to break to go his way.
Yeah.
Mark, can I add something to that really quickly?
Of course.
It was interesting because during the inauguration and the Capitol Rotunda, I believe it was during that moment that President Trump, or beforehand, spoke with Senator Chuck Schumer in basically saying, hey, man, how are we going to start working together? We got to figure out a way to work together. And I remember when I was in the White House, the President Trump really wanted to figure out a way to work with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. Remember, he gave money to these people. They were friends. Like, this is the thing. I mean, which is so interesting about Donald Trump. And so for Donald Trump to then be betrayed by a Nancy Pelosi when they moved forward with filing the articles of impeachment, it was to him, I think, such a betrayal that he himself was like, I just can't believe she just did this. Like, he really wanted to work with Nancy Pelosi, really wanted, on infrastructure, for example, really wanted to work with Chuck Schumer. And then there was this massive divide. To your point, Steve, I think that they could not, they just really didn't like Donald Trump at that point, and they knew they had to stop him. So I think that's where we've ended up. And I do think President Trump is going to try to make an effort in figuring out the Schumer situation and trying to find some of these Democrats he can work with, like a John Fetterman, for example.
Yeah, he's going to have to. It's funny, I hadn't thought of it till just now, but that's something that Joe Biden and Donald Trump could talk about, saying Nancy Pelosi's a piece of work, right?
Oh, yes. They can agree on that.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, and I may be wrong about this, it may be painting with way too broad a brush. Bill Clinton obviously knew a ton about politics, and George Bush did too, and Barack Obama did as well. There were members of Congress in their own parties who would have said, I understand our party better. I've been around, I get it too. I don't think there's a single Republican in the House or the Senate who would claim to understand and have a hold on the Republican Party compared to the president. To me, that's part of why he's so formidable, because they're just like deference, because he's done it. He's gotten elected twice. If he endorses in a primary, that person wins, right?
Well, it didn't work
a
out
lot
with
of
that
power.
first midterm election, those first midterm
Well,
elections.
in the midterms, I'm talking about within the party. Who understands the party, right?
Oh, true.
Like,
But I'm just
you know,
saying, like, if what come the midterm elections, like last time around during the midterm elections, when President Trump endorsed some of these candidates, they
Yeah.
felt it didn't work.
in the general. But
Yeah.
I'm saying understanding the party,
Yeah.
like they just have to defer. All right, let's bring folks in. As always, I'll unmute you. Tell us where you are so people who don't know can know, and what's on your mind for Steve and for Mercedes. Joseph, you're up.
Hey, Mark, how are you? I'm
Good,
a
sir.
long time, second time. We spoke once before the election. Thanks so
And
much.
tell folks where you are. Thank you for coming
I'm
down.
in Miami, Florida. Cold.
My
rainy-
hometown.
Yes, Miami, Florida. As we're probably have the coldest day of the year today. It's we're like dangerously close from the National Guard.
There are
passing
cars
out.
all over. There are cars all over
Yeah,
Miami
we're
named
not going
after
to cry for you
Mercedes.
from 3-degree Washington.
Yeah,
That's
no,
funny.
I'm not getting any sympathy from folks up north, but it's a chilly day for us anyway. Yeah, so I'm kind of following up. I listened this morning. We had a very good discussion about J6, and I know it's just something that it's just hard for us all to deal with. I believe we're all still kind of unpacking this, in our own way, right? And I, like everybody else, like most people anyway, think it was a horrible day for the country. Absolutely don't think there was a lot of things that Trump did that he probably shouldn't have done. The optics, the setup, the proximity to the Capitol, all of these things. I mean, you can go on and for 100 years asking questions about that. And as wrong as all that stuff was, I still have some sense, just from what I've seen and from the evidence that's kind of out there now and all over the place, that there's the one side of J6 where you want to point the finger at Trump and what he did and all the, Trump supporters that were there that day and everything bad that they did. But, I can't shake this feeling that there was stuff done on the other side. And there were lots of things now that you can find on the internet, and there's and some credible evidence about FBI involvement, and so my question to you is, with all that stuff out there, I mean, and now it looks like the willingness of Kash Patel and others to start basically, do you think there's going to be any serious investigation into that side of it, right? What may have happened on the other side to take a political situation that was handed to them and exploit it to the fullest, which seems to me, and I don't know if I believe this yet or not, but I can't shake this feeling that there was at least some things going on the other side that exacerbated to the point that made it probably a bigger event than it would have been otherwise.
So as you know, presumption of grace to all, I respect everybody's point of view. And before I let Steve and then Mercedes respond, I look very closely at criticism of our coverage of January 6th and at Republicans and conservatives who raise points to say this should mitigate how people feel about what happened. All I'd ask you is to be fact-based, right? Fact-based. And again, I say this with respect, to say there's stuff on the internet that buttresses that point of view. Stuff on the internet is not fact-based. It might be true, but you could go on the internet tonight and find that the American people owe Donald Trump an apology for January 6th, if you believe everything on the internet, right? So all I'd ask is, on this platform and in your lives, just be fact-based about what happened that day. That's all I ask people, and I think that shouldn't be a controversial position. Steve.
Not at all. I totally agree with that.
Steve.
And I think, and I shouldn't have said on the internet, because it has a
that's all right. I get what you mean.
There's a lot of bad stuff out there, but
yes, sir. Okay,
others have seen enough credible stuff out there that leads to some questions.
Understood.
That's fair.
Thank you for that. Steve, go ahead.
I've seen nothing credible that leads to any questions about this. I think it's very clear. I feel very strongly personally about this because I know and have talked to a lot of the people of both parties and reporters who were in the building on that day, were threatened, witnessed what happened, saw the angry mob attack police officers. repeatedly, saw the angry mob threaten staff of both parties again, threaten members, senators of both parties. There is no question what happened here, and there's no question that it was a terrible, terrible moment, and that people who committed violence against police should not have been pardoned, should have been prosecuted. And I have seen no evidence to support anything on the other side. And again, I think it's highly unfortunate that Trump pardoned them. I think of all the stuff he's done, I think it is the most indefensible. We can disagree about policies done. We can disagree about immigration. We can disagree about DOJ. We can disagree about where you are on a particular issue. But I think on the January 6th issue, it is a stain on the people who did it, and it's a stain on him that he was willing to let them off the hook.
Yeah,
Mercedes.
Steve,
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say, Steve, I agree with you, and I agree about the bad actors that should, anybody that assaulted police, all that stuff. And the they I mean is not necessarily the perpetrators. The they I mean is for lack of a better way to put this, the other side exploiting the situation to paint it into this horrible thing that they can use politically against Donald Trump, which it was horrible, right? You don't have to paint much because it already was horrible, but there was this effort to build on it to create a situation that grew into something bigger than it might have normally been. That's what I'm talking about. But I agree with you on all the bad stuff. There's no question. It is bad. I'm not trying to paint it otherwise. I fully acknowledge it's a bad thing. Shouldn't have happened. They should have done it. But there's this other side of it that really has been largely unexplored. And so that's what I'm trying. And I'm sorry if I'm not articulating it well, but.
So Steve, why was Ashley Babbitt shot? She should have never died. Ashley Babbitt should have never died that day. Why was there a grandmother who was praying in the Capitol, who wasn't part of the angry mob, who was sentenced to jail? There was over sentencing that was happening. Many of these individuals who were put into these prisons were put in solitary confinements for months. They were treated worse than murderers and rapists. Yes, it should have never happened. We all agree that it is horrible what happened in the Capitol that day. There was a lot of anger with individuals who did not feel that this election was run properly.
Mercedes.
Yes, sir.
I'm only interrupting you because I want Steve to respond to some of the stuff you already said, and then I want you to pick back up. But I don't want to lose the thread of what you said. So, Steve, Mercedes raised three things. I wonder how you feel about them. Because, again, what we're trying to do is create some commonality here about how to think about it rather than just total polarization. I don't know if you're familiar enough to answer based on the facts. Are you concerned that Ashley Babbitt was shot? Do you see why people feel upset about that?
I think
not just the loss
of life. Any loss of life is.
I understand, but more than the loss of life.
I do think there was an angry mob that was violent, that was about to break into the hall of the U.S. Congress and threaten and potentially kill members of Congress, and that the Capitol Police and many of the people who question the Ashley Babbitt shooting will not question when police who feel threatened in various cities shoot somebody. The reality was there was an angry mob which was about to overrun the House chamber and potentially kill members. And as a member of the United States Capitol Police, the Capitol Police job was to protect the hall of the Congress.
Okay.
Which, Steve, to your point, and Mark, and Joe, to your point, this raises the bigger question as to why there wasn't enough security there. And we know that, and these are the questions that need to be answered that were never answered by the J6 committee.
Why did Donald Trump send a mob?
No, hold on.
Donald Trump did not. And I don't want to. We're gonna.
This program's different here. We're not trying to fight about Trump that day. That can happen lots of places.
No, look,
Mercedes,
I wish Trump would,
I want to deal with the three things you said, okay? And Steve said what he thought about Ashley Babbitt. Steve's loss of life, horrible. He's nothing but sadness about that. But Steve's view is the officer was there. They were trying to get into the House chamber. He used his best judgment in that moment. And so his best judgment.
He wasn't attacking anybody.
Well, okay.
He wasn't attacking anybody. She should have never been shot.
Okay.
She should have never been shot.
Steve, second thing she said, she gave an example of a grandmother who was there. Do you believe it's possible, or do you know that it's true that some people who were charged really were charged unfairly, that they were indicted and swept up into it, and there's no reason that happened with some people? Do you
I don't
believe
think
that
there's
to be
ever
true?
been a police investigation or a situation, a war or anything else that involves thousands of people and a large investigation where you couldn't point to somebody and say they were unfairly charged. I have known
Okay.
nothing about that particular case, but I'm not going to
Right.
say. And if Donald Trump, instead of blanket pardoning 1,500 people without looking at the facts of any of the cases, had picked out, for example, I know nothing about this particular grandmother, but said, you know what, I'm going to pardon that person, or I'm going to commute this person based on a legitimate investigation of the facts of their case, that would be one thing. But to issue a blanket pardon to thousands of people who tried to overrun the citadel of democracy and stop the peaceful transfer of power is not defensible.
Mercedes, what do you think of that? That the blanket pardon could certainly rub some people the wrong way because it treats everybody equally.
Well,
Whereas,
maybe Joe Biden should have never pardoned his own son and his, and these preemptive pardons of his family. I mean, it just shows you, should there be a commission on pardons to figure out what's the best use of the pardon power by the presidents? So, I think it's kind of interesting because JD Vance earlier, I think in one of the Sunday shows, mentioned about he didn't move forward with like a blanket pardon mentality. It was like if they use violence against the police, maybe they shouldn't be pardoned. I believe that was kind of the language he used.
yeah,
Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but I
no, you're
believe that's
right.
what
You're
he
right. And
kind of
that's not
said.
what Donald Trump did.
Yes, and Donald Trump went to just get it done. And I think this is when you're moving too fast, right? This is what we were talking about earlier, which is they're moving so fast to get things done that it's like you want to make sure you're doing it in the best way possible. I probably would have looked at the cases individually, but at this point in time, the president made his decision. They're moving forward with it. I do think that so many people got caught up in this being over sentenced, being treated horribly in these prisons, and that should never have happened. And I spoke to one of the moms, one of the aunts whose nephew committed suicide following the J6 situation. And it was, it's horrible. It's horrible. Like some of these guys, they were just following the crowd. They didn't anyway. They think, that they were going to be caught up with some of these really bad instigators who really should be the ones being prosecuted. Not all these not all these other individuals that were caught up in this.
All right, Mercedes, I want to ask Steve a question and then bring someone else in. But can you answer Joseph's question, which is, do you think there'll be an investigation by House Republicans? We talked about Mike Johnson talking about that today, that will answer some of these questions about whether there was an effort by Democrats, on the front end or the back end, whatever it is, to exploit this or to make it seem different than it was. Mercedes.
Sorry, ask the question again.
Do you think, to go to Joseph's question, do you think that there'll be, either by the House Republicans or someone else, an investigation that brings forward facts that makes it clear what role Democrats might have played on the front end or the back end to make this more or different than it would have
I
otherwise
think
been?
that it looks like it looks like the House of Representatives is looking to investigate the J6 committee for what I find to be a very partisan and very they were targeting President Trump to try to take him down. It was obviously overly produced in trying to make their own case, and where allegedly they got rid of evidence. So I think that's going to move forward. I got to tell you, I feel that Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, they have so much on their plate that for them to going back or moving forward, to go back on the January 6th component, I just don't see it happening right now.
Yeah.
I think that they have too much that they have to deal with on the front end to basically say, okay, let's go back and see if if the FBI was involved, or if the Democrats, I just don't see them moving in that direction.
Okay. Joseph, thank you.
Real quick. I heard something.
Oops, sorry, you got muted.
Those that were pardoned could no longer claim the Fifth Amendment, so they could be called to testify. Correct. And that's a very interesting thing that I didn't know about receiving a pardon.
Absolutely.
That would open up, it seems to me, an avenue to a lot of valuable information about the event.
Potentially.
People who study, the J6 Commission, the people who studied all the evidence here and have a great depth of knowledge on this subject.
Potentially.
Very good to hear their open, candid thoughts, not guarded by the protection of the
Yep.
Fifth Amendment.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining. Steve, I'd love for you to just tell us what you think of the preemptive Biden family pardons.
I agree with Mercedes. We need to, and I don't know how to do it. I guess I'm not a lawyer. I guess we need a constitutional amendment eventually. But the pardon power has been misused by everybody. I don't think there's a equivalency between what Trump did on J6 and what Biden did with his family. I think it's a much smaller, but I think it's unfortunate. I don't think he should have pardoned them.
What as a
It was not
just in terms of
explained well. It wasn't.
yeah.
You know,
What's
if he
the
was going to do it, tell us why.
principle? What's the well, he did put out a statement, but what's the principle that you feel is violated, or principles? Like, why is that a bad thing, what he did?
It feels like self-dealing. It feels like, was there a legitimate chance that they were going to be in somehow in trouble? I hadn't heard anything about any of his brothers or his sister being involved in anything. I just think it was not. Either you believe in the criminal justice system or you don't. I happen to. A lot of people I'm reading your chat obviously don't. So maybe all the people who don't believe in the criminal justice system think it's okay for him to pardon people. But I think generally I believe in the criminal justice system, and it acts in a fair way, hopefully. And so I just don't see a justification for why he would have pardoned them.
Yep. Matthew, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind, please.
I live in New York City. I traditionally join your show because I want to talk about the Democratic Party. I can't talk about January 6th.
Okay.
I have too much reverence for the
Yeah.
American institutions. It just gets me way too upset. So,
talk
Steve,
about
what
something
I
else.
want to understand is, this question is for you. Why the Democrats seem to have so much difficulty creating a rational method or a rational response to Donald Trump. After 4 years, you would think that they would have inoculated themselves against Trump derangement syndrome and have been able to pick a couple of issues. He just issued 100 executive orders, okay? And Chris Murphy is asking questions to Elise Stefanik about Elon Musk's signal to the, I mean, the complete hysterical absurdity that makes the party a laughingstock. There are things about birthright citizenship. If you want to talk about January 6th, you could have talked about some of the most egregious examples, but there are a number of different policies that the American people are not supportive of, that are clearly in excess of what the administration was given a mandate to do. And I can't understand why the party cannot put together a coherent and rational response to Trump that makes them seem like a legitimate and respectable governing alternative.
Incredible question. Steve.
It's a very good question. And I think it will be the test of us over the next 2 years and 4 years is, can we do what you say? And the answer at the moment is, I don't know. And I'm not, I think that one problem, and it's not excusing it, but the reality is, and I've seen this repeatedly, no matter who was president, D or R, when you're in the opposition and you don't have the command of the presidency and the attention grabbing of the presidency, it's very hard when you know, House, Senate, lots of people, governors, like, who's your spokespeople? Can you get them all on the same page? Everybody has different, needs, wants, desires, hopes, dreams. It's hard. It's just very hard. And we do not have a natural leader at the moment. We have a bunch of leaders, many of whom are very talented, but we don't have one that the media can focus on. And we have a very diffuse media. And I think, between now and the next midterm election can we drive, as you say? I think there's an enormous amount of substance that's wrong that Donald Trump is doing that we need to have a coherent response to. And there's just no question. And I agree with you about, and I've been a victim of this, I know victim's the wrong word, but this is my own fault too, and many of us, in that Trump gets you so spun up, he gets you so angry, and that you focus on, and he's part of it is a strategy on his part to get you to focus on something that is not, in the end of the day, all that important, instead of focusing on the important policy choice he just made, which is terrible. And as a party, we've got to do a better job. There's just no question. You're absolutely right. I'm
Steve,
just not sure what the answer is.
Steve, who are one or two of your leaders you think are doing it well now?
I think Hakeem Jeffries is doing a very good job. I think he's managing a big group of people, which I know from having worked for a Democratic leader in the Congress. It's very hard. But I think he has the ability between now and 2026 to potentially become one of those voices. I think we have some governors out there who are doing a terrific job. And I have no doubt that our next nominee is going to come from among the governors. I happen to be a partisan of Josh Shapiro. If you follow Josh Shapiro on TikTok or social media, there is an authenticity about him that is missing with some of our Washington figures. He's just very good at sort of delivering a message that's, as he said, GSD. Am I allowed to use that word on this show?
You can. You
get
can
shit
indeed.
done. And the fact that he's willing to use that as his message, as a governor, I get shit done, right? That's what I do every day. And that's one of the people's frustrations with Washington is they don't think stuff gets done. And that's one of Trump's benefits is he acts like he's getting a lot done. I don't happen to like what he's getting done. And I think a lot of it will not in the long term rebound to his favor. Because a lot of it's not that popular when we put the full spotlight on it. But he's doing things, and they like that.
Matthew, thank you. Great question. Your 3 A's were attention,
authenticity, attention, and action.
And maybe if he gets stuff done, it'll be accomplishments.
Mercedes, and part of the problem with Congress is it's very hard in Congress because it's so big to demand attention.
Yeah.
Congress is designed not to be an action-oriented, they pass bills, but it's not pretty and it doesn't happen fast. And too many of our members of both parties do not come across as authentic. And they need to spend less time listening to their staff and their consultants telling them what to say. And they need one of John Fetterman's big positives is he comes across as totally authentic. He's saying what he thinks.
Maybe not the best dresser in the Senate, but definitely authentic.
Yeah. Another question for Steve and then Mercedes, and bring somebody back in. Fetterman lost some of his staff who were progressive and thought he was being too, accommodationist on some issues and on Israel, for instance. How does the progressive wing of the party with whom you're in great touch, how do they feel about Fetterman now?
I think he's a figure that is controversial with a lot of people because I think a lot of people like his authenticity. A lot of people believe he's truly a progressive, but they don't agree with him on every issue. And I think that's one of the things our party has to do is we can't be slavish to like a set agenda. Like people are going to have different views on different issues, and sometimes you're not going to agree with them 100%. You only agree with them 70%. I listen to a lot of Trump voters in this show and focus groups. They don't agree with everything Donald Trump's doing, but they like the direction. They like the movement. And I think that's where Fetterman gets a lot of benefit is.
Mercedes, Fetterman and Shapiro seem not to like each other. Not totally uncommon for people from the same party in the same state who have aspirations that are pretty big. The benchmark is Lautenberg and Torricelli. Steve knows. Steve knows what I'm talking about. Those two guys really did not like each other. How do you appraise the political skills, the political future in the next 4 years? One from Harrisburg, one from Washington, of Fetterman and Shapiro. Are they formidable to you?
Well, think about it. What's the one issue that kind of unites them is Israel, right? So they have Democrat Party has an Israel problem with all the anti-Semitics that we've seen across the country. Obviously the Hamas issue. It's been really tricky, I think, for the Democrats on how they've handled this. And one of the things that Fetterman agrees on with President Trump is Israel. And Josh Shapiro, he's Jewish. Obviously for him, Israel is an important issue. So that's an issue that really kind of divides the Democrat Party right now. Then I think one of the big issues with the Democrat Party that at least I saw from the outside, and it was interesting because when I would watch Kamala Harris give her speeches, I sometimes would sit there and be like, well, if I would be her consultant, what would I tell her to say? Like, I would always just kind of like in my head go like, this is what I'd advise her. And so for the Democrats, it constantly felt that the one topic they would talk about was just abortion. It was always like, well, the economy, but it's about abortion. And then it would always be like the solution to anything was abortion. And I think that issue fell very flat for the American people. It just did. And so that on top of Trump was the biggest threat to democracy. And the American people were saying, yeah, but I got to pay my bills and things are too expensive. it just really didn't connect, I think, with the American voter. And I'm trying to say this in a very, look, I'm a conservative, I'm a Republican. I really am trying to say this from like, I'm stepping back from it and trying to be
All right,
objective.
but who's more formidable?
Oh, from the Fetterman
Shapiro?
or Josh? Oh, Josh Shapiro is a brilliant communicator. When I would watch him give any sort of commentary on television during post debate, whatever it may be, you could have said Gavin Newsom, very formidable. Obviously, I think he's so far left, but he's now ruined his political career in the handling of these LA wildfires. But I would say Josh Shapiro is, I would say, the biggest threat right now. I mean, things can change in 4 years, God only knows, but the biggest threat right now, because he is so articulate in presenting the vision for the Democrat Party.
Jeffrey, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind.
Thank you, Mark. I'm in Maryland, and interesting comments about Josh Shapiro because I was born in Philly and went to school there until I moved to Maryland.
No Commanders. No. Sorry,
Steve,
Eagle fans.
Steve, I want to say something you said at the top of the show to make sure I heard you right. You said you didn't like anything that Trump has done so far. And I wanted to sort of drill down a little bit, because specifically the two things that I think lost the Democrats a lot of votes, that surveys seem to show, was the DEI thing that sort of infiltrated into way too much of our lives. And the other thing, of course, is the illegal immigration. So what about the feds getting rid of DEI? What do you dislike about that? And what do you dislike about trying to clamp down on immigration? Because I was never sure that I saw open the borders in the previous Biden Democratic policy party run 5 years ago.
I think you can have an immigration policy that is, I think we need a stronger immigration policy. I don't agree with Donald Trump's immigration policy. I think his immigration policy is extreme. And I think it's part of his, maybe he won't do it all, but I think he's wrong about birthright citizenship. I mean, I just go down the list. I think all the stuff he's proposed on immigration is extreme, and I think we should have a different. I think we should, we had a bipartisan negotiated immigration deal with a very conservative Republican senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford, and Donald Trump killed it. And the answer on immigration is to come up with a bipartisan deal. And we've done it before. We did it a long time ago, and Lindsey Graham and Chuck Schumer came up with one, and it was killed by the House Republicans at the time. The only way we're ever going to solve this problem is with a bipartisan solution, not with a strongman ethic that involves a lot of stuff that I think is going to be harmful to people. I also think fundamentally, this country was made great by immigrants. We need more immigrants in this country, not less. We just need to figure out how to control it and have a rational policy. But we clearly need more people. Second, on DEI, I don't think, again, it's extreme. I don't think you get rid of all DEI. I think the reality is diversity is one of the strengths of this country, and having more people in the workforce of all varieties is a good thing. And I don't think by, again, taking this not a scalpel approach, but taking a meat axe approach where you just get rid of everything is a good policy.
But you agree, like 10 million illegal aliens in this.
Peace, love, and understanding. You've used the word extreme at least twice to answer my questions. So answering,
I think Donald Trump's policies
by
are
saying
extreme,
but you're not giving examples. So I agree with you.
Getting rid of birthright citizenship is
the
extreme.
Constitutional. That'll get thrown out of court. So
well, I know, but he did it. You say it's going to get thrown out of court.
Take that off
That's his policy.
But you can't. But your only argument now is he's trying to change the Constitution, which the Supreme Court will not allow. Tell me more about DEI. We all understand. We all understand about immigrants. That's a platitude. My grandparents were immigrants. They didn't speak English, so we all understand about that. But my grandparents were legal. So we're talking about illegal immigrants. We're not talking about importance of immigrants and importance of the American spectrum. You're just saying extreme. So tell me what you don't like about the federal government.
I think mass deportations is a bad policy.
How about deportation? How about deportation of people who've committed crimes since they got to the United States? Is that okay?
I think that we have to have a system to adjudicate that. I don't think we can just.
Well, how about if somebody's fits two factors? They came to the country legally and they've committed a crime in the United States, convicted by. That's fine. You'd favor that, or you'd be okay with it.
I'm fine with that.
You'd favor it,
So if he
or
would
you'd
have
be
just
okay
said
with
that,
it?
you would have agreed
Hold
with
on.
that part.
You'd favor it,
But
or you're
again,
okay with it? Which
I'm
is
fine
it?
with it.
Do you favor it?
Yes, I favor it, Mark.
Okay. So maybe that's all he does, and so you could celebrate his policy.
Yeah, but that was not his entirety of his policy.
Well,
part of the problem is people say, well, Trump says all these things, but he's not going to do them, so it's okay.
right. I know you
But,
like when I
there
put you
is
on
a
the
whole
spot.
process to go
Hold
through.
on, let me one more. Sorry, and then you. I know you like when I put you on the spot. Whose immigration policy do you prefer? The 4 years of the Biden immigration policy, or what Trump is proposing?
It's a binary choice that doesn't.
It is a binary choice.
I favor the Lindsey Graham, Chuck Schumer bipartisan deal.
But if you had to choose,
10 years ago, I favor the James Lankford bipartisan immigration
I understand,
deal.
but which would you prefer? What Biden did for 4 years, or what Trump is proposing? It's not like an abstract thing, because Biden
I don't think that's a legitimate question, Mark.
All right, Mercedes, say something legit.
Well, no, I'm just enjoying Jeffrey and Steve go at it. This is so much fun. So I think, Jeffrey, you're so smart. Wow. I want you on my show. And Steve, I'll take you on my show as well. But I got to tell you.
I'll be in DC on February 2nd.
Okay, that sounds good. We'll make a date. So I think that I don't understand why the Biden administration just lost such control over the immigration issue. Allowing 10 million illegal aliens to come through the border, creating the chaos that they did. For me, I'm a huge advocate for saving children from child and human trafficking. It is the worst, most demonic crime that exists, okay? The raping of 11-year-old children, the fact that we are missing these children, we're missing over 400,000 children. That is inexcusable to me. So, and to me, I view this issue as something that is not a Democrat issue or a Republican issue. This is as Americans, we have an obligation to make sure that the children don't end up in the hands of human traffickers. And I absolutely agree that these drug cartels should be, as President Trump designated them, state-sponsored terrorist organization. I mean, what they've done to kill hundreds of thousands of Americans in this country is just simply unacceptable. And I do have to say that I think one of Biden's biggest failures was this lack of control on the immigration issue. And so we could talk about the Lankford bill with the Democrats. Look, that bill wasn't going to.
No. Who froze? Me or Mercedes?
Frozen.
Not me. All right. We lost Mercedes. All right. We're over anyway. Hopefully Mercedes will come back.
Okay.
Jeffrey, thank you for a great question.
Sure.
We really appreciate you joining. Come back regularly.
To bring the daughter over that's 16 years old, who is then sexually assaulted. All right. Let's be real. That's insane. And they're the ones profiting off of these vulnerable families in Latin America and across the globe. And then you're also bringing in these special interest individuals, some of them who are terrorists who have come through our border with any control. So remember, Biden rescinded everything that Donald Trump did. It ended up with this increase of illegal immigration. We've seen criminal activities happening with some of these illegal aliens, including the gang members from Tren de Aragua from Venezuela. And I got to tell you, it's got to be fixed. And it's why you've seen the dramatic changes that Donald Trump is pushing. And that's not even going to be enough. I mean, we do need immigration reform at some point. We do need to get a handle of making sure that we allow legal immigrants to come into this country. We are a very generous country. We allow over 1 million legal immigrants to come in through the country. But now, because they know they can come through the back door illegally under Biden, they abused the system and they came in that way. That's simply unacceptable. It created a national security crisis, and I believe a humanitarian crisis.
I agree with both of you on immigration, believe it or not. Thank you both. So grateful to you for making time. I can tell because I know my community well. Everybody loves you both, so we hope you'll come back.
Great.
And
we love you too, Mark. And we love
the
community.
Hope to see you both in person. Steve, thank you. Mercedes, thank you. Everybody, thanks for watching. 9 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow. Dan, Sean, and I'll be back for the morning meeting, and I'll be back tomorrow night. And we wish you all a great evening. Thank you so much.
Thanks.